Have you ever met someone who seems to have all the answers, but no real connection with anyone? Someone who treats life like a math problem, who explains everything with logic, but never really knows how they feel? Maybe that person is you. Maybe at some point you learned that feeling is dangerous and thinking is safer. That if you become a master of reason, no one can ever hurt you. That emotion is weakness, that vulnerability is a disadvantage. But what if that extra dose of reason is actually pushing you away from real life, from other people, from yourself? Maybe what you call clarity is actually loneliness. The allure of reason. Reason is a gift. It's what got us out of caves, helped us build bridges, map the stars, write books, and cure diseases. Through reason, we organize the world, decipher patterns, anticipate risks, and find solutions. It gives us the illusion, or the promise, of control, of safety, of predictability. And who wouldn't want that? In a world that feels more unstable each day, where chaos is always lurking, reason appears to be a refuge, a silent fortress that shields us from the unexpected. When everything fails, logic remains, cold, steady, reliable. It's easy to fall in love with that. Clear answers, well-built arguments, decisions justified by numbers, statistics, facts. It's easy to find comfort in logic when emotions feel confusing, unpredictable, uncontrollable. It's easy to hide behind a well-structured thought, especially when your heart is in ruins. That's why many of us, without realizing it, crown reason as sovereign, as the only legitimate path to understanding, as the only valid language of truth. And we're not alone in that choice. Just look at the history of Western philosophy. René Descartes, for example, was a turning point. He's the one who said, "I think, therefore I am," a phrase that seems simple but carries deep implications. For Descartes, thought, the ability to doubt, reflect, reason, was the single undeniable foundation of existence. If I can doubt everything, even the world around me, there's still one thing that remains. The act of doubting itself, so someone must be doing the doubting, and that someone is me. The thinking mind became the basis of reality. That view influenced centuries of science, culture, education, politics. Reason became the compass, the standard, the measure of all things. Emotion came to be seen with suspicion, noise, something that messes things up, that distorts, that keeps us from seeing clearly. Intuition, downgraded to a primitive superstition. Vulnerability, a sign of weakness. Pure rationality became glorified, especially in modern times. After all, cold logic supposedly leads to better decisions, better negotiation, winning debates, avoiding suffering. Isn't that what we all want? In logic, everything seems to make sense. In the math of reason, there's always an equation that solves the problem. There's always a possible explanation. Always a rational way out. That's where the danger lies. Because when we believe that logic alone will save us, we start living only by it. We start gauging every decision by the yardstick of reason. We measure feelings, justify attachments, rationalize pain. We begin treating human relationships like contracts, emotions like algorithms, and our bonds like exchange systems. Without noticing, we trust ideas more than we trust people. We trust arguments more than we trust hugs. We trust our mind more than our heart. That's the point where reason, once our ally, starts building walls. Invisible walls, silent walls, but still very real. We start responding with logic when someone just needs us to listen. We offer solutions when someone simply wanted our presence. We suggest alternatives when what they really needed was a shoulder to cry on. We start explaining when we should be feeling. And from using reason as a shield so often, we end up stuck inside it, comfortably alone, proudly right, and deeply distant. Have you ever known anyone like that? Someone who's always right, but somehow absent? Someone who has an argument for everything, but won't let themselves cry? Someone who solves everything in their head and suffocates everything in their chest? Maybe that person is you. And if it is, this isn't a judgment. It's an invitation to notice that rationalism can seduce us not just because of what it offers, but also because of what it lets us avoid. It lets us avoid the discomfort of uncertainty, avoid the pain of feeling without understanding, avoid the risk of giving ourselves to something that can't be proven. Reason protects us, but sometimes it also traps us. Because living only by reason is like wandering in a maze of mirrors. Everything seems to reflect logic, yet nothing leads to the exit. Everything gets explained, but nothing really transforms. Of course, thinking is necessary. Reason is a powerful tool, but when it's the only way we operate, we become its hostages. French philosopher Blaise Pascal, who lived around the same time as Descartes, said, "The heart has its reasons which reason knows nothing of." And maybe he was onto something. Because no matter how much logic guides us, some things can only be understood from within, through experience, silence, touch, a look in someone's eyes. There are decisions that don't fit on a spreadsheet. There are pains that can't be explained, you just have to go through them. There are connections that don't make sense but somehow save us. There are truths we can't prove yet we feel. Real life can't be contained by reason alone, because reason is a lens. But the world isn't a microscope, it's an ocean. And to actually live, sometimes you've got to get wet. But before diving in, you have to recognize that as seductive as logic is, it can't handle everything. It's there to serve life, not the other way around. Thinking is wonderful, but so is feeling. That's the point when we start to wake up, when we see that the same reason that once saved us is now pushing us away. And that's exactly the path leading to the next step, to that moment when logic just isn't enough, when reasoning can't fill the emptiness. That's where the crisis begins. That's where the silence gets heavy. That's when we look around and realize we're alone. Not because people aren't there, but because there's too much distance. Distance built with arguments, justifications, certainties. Distance where there used to be affection. And that's the moment, the breaking point, we'll talk about next. Because reason enchants us, but isolation wakes us up. And sometimes, it's only when everything finally fits that we realize something's missing. When reason shuts you off. Do you know Lucio? Maybe not by name, but maybe by his story. Lucio was the type of person everyone admired for his clarity. He always had an answer. He could always see both sides. He'd calmly, patiently, logically explain anything, almost flawlessly. At work, he was the peacemaker. Among friends, the rational counselor. In his family, the balanced one. He used to say emotions were like driving drunk, dangerous. You have to be rational, objective, and efficient, he'd say over and over. And that's how he started handling life. With formulas, arguments, spreadsheets. His relationship ended. It's for the best. We just weren't compatible. His dad got sick. Statistically, his odds of recovery are pretty good. A friend walked away without explanation. Everybody has their own path. I can't do anything about that. On the surface, Lucio seemed just fine. Strong, in control, unshakable. But on the inside, it was another story. Inside, there was a noise. A dull discomfort like background music that never stops. A loneliness he couldn't quite explain. He could feel, but he wouldn't let himself feel. Every time an emotion threatened to surface, he'd lock it away in a mental drawer labeled irrational, ignore, and keep moving. But life won't let itself be fully controlled by logic. One night, after an exhausting day, Lucio got home. Everything was in order. The light was on, dinner was ready, the house was clean. But something felt off. Too much silence. He looked around and saw emptiness. No note, no invitation, no text saying, "How are you?" Right then, for the first time in ages, Lucio realized he was alone. Not physically, emotionally. People had stopped reaching out. Not because they hated him, not because they didn't care, but because with him they couldn't be themselves. Everything with him required an explanation, justification, or defense. There was no space for vulnerability, no warmth, just analysis. And in that silence, something broke open. Lucio cried, for no clear reason, with no explanation, no logic. And in that cry, he felt more human than he had in years. He realized that by running away from pain, he'd also run away from life. Lucio's story isn't about one specific person. It's about a choice, about a mechanism. It's about what happens when we use reason like armor. Because, let's be clear, rationality is a virtue. It protects us from impulsive decisions, helps us see the bigger picture, guides us through tough times. But rationalism, seeing reason as an absolute philosophy, is different. It's the belief that reason is superior to every other way of knowing, that only what can be proven matters, that emotions are just noise, that intuition is a flaw, and that worldview has a cost. When we live solely in our heads, we stop listening to our bodies. We ignore the signs of exhaustion. We disconnect from others. We pack away pains we can't name. But ignoring something doesn't make it go away. It just grows in the dark. Existential philosophy warns us about this. Jean-Paul Sartre, for instance, talked about bad faith, denying our freedom and human complexity in favor of rigid roles. Like saying, "This is just how I am, rational, that's my style." But that's just an escape. It's a denial of the fact that we're contradictory, sensitive, and ambiguous, that we feel even when we don't want to, that we get hurt, even if we're totally logical. Kierkegaard, often called the father of existential angst, said that deep pain doesn't come from making mistakes, but from living on the surface, from not getting involved, not surrendering, not diving into the paradox of being human. Because to be human is, by nature, illogical. We love what we don't understand. We feel what we don't want to. We desire what hurts us. We suffer from memories, dreams, projections, and none of that fits into logic. When we deny it, we become machines. And the trouble with becoming a machine is, machines don't connect. They operate, but they never really touch each other. That's why rationalism, when taken too far, isolates us. It creates functional relationships but not affectionate ones. Efficient conversations but not deep ones. Correct decisions but not human ones. It makes us say, "I get what you're feeling," but never actually feel it with you. It makes us handle emotional problems like formulas. If she's sad, then give her space. If he pulled away, then just accept it. If I'm hurting, then I'm being weak. But emotions aren't equations. They don't want solutions. They want presence. They don't want to be explained. They want to be lived. And when you deny that, in yourself or in others, you drift away, bit by bit, until one day you realize there's no one left around you. Rationalism fails because it forgets we're made of flesh, of pulses, of emotional memories, of open wounds. And more often than not, the most rational thing to do is to sit next to someone and cry with them. There's a scene in the movie Her that captures this idea. The main character, Theodore, falls in love with an intelligent operating system, an AI named Samantha. She understands everything about him. She knows what he likes. She analyzes his behavior. She tells perfect jokes at just the right time. But something is missing. She's logical. She's kind. But she's not human. And even though Theodore's understood in every logical way, he's still lonely. Because in the end, we don't just want to be rationally understood. We want to be felt. We want someone who resonates with us, who not only notices we're upset but actually feels our pain too, who doesn't just understand why we hurt, but holds us through it. And that, logic alone can't offer. So ask yourself, how much are you using logic to avoid pain? How much of your emotional clarity is just a defense mechanism? How much have you built a mental life so you wouldn't have to deal with real life? Because the real risk of rationalism isn't just being cold, it's drying out on the inside. It's becoming a desert that's perfectly organized, living with all the right answers but with no warmth. The way back starts with one simple choice. Allow yourself not to understand. Allow yourself not to control everything. Allow yourself to feel without explaining. Allow yourself to mess up for the sake of love. Allow yourself to love without logic. Because, as the Brazilian writer Clarice Lispector once said, freedom is too little. What I desire still has no name. And maybe what you desire won't fit into reason either. Maybe what you're looking for isn't found in answers but in genuine presence. Maybe what you're missing isn't logic. It's touch, affection, connection, and it all begins with a simple gesture, stepping down from your head and returning to your heart. Life beyond logic. After reason fails to fill the emptiness, the silence changes its tone. It used to be a comfortable silence, controlled, safe, distant. Now, it's a silence that shouts. It's your body starting to speak when your mind can't handle it anymore. It's that heaviness in your chest during moments that don't have a reason. It's the lump in your throat when everything is under control. It's the moment you start asking, is there more life outside my head? And the answer, however scary, is yes. There is a world beyond logic. A world where things don't need an explanation to be real, where you can simply feel, without permission, without a manual, without shame. That's where true transformation happens. Because look, reason can solve problems, but it can't heal wounds. Reason can organize ideas, but it can't fill voids. Reason can help you choose, but it can't teach you how to love. That comes from somewhere else, from the body, from intuition, from that quiet understanding that needs no translation, from the hug that says more than any speech. But don't get me wrong, this isn't a war on reason. Reason is necessary, fundamental, valuable. It gives us structure, clarity, perspective. The problem is when it turns into a prison, when everything you feel has to be approved by logic to exist, as if you told yourself, if I can't explain what I feel, it's not valid. If I can't prove I'm hurting, then I must be exaggerating. If I don't understand my grief, it's not legit. That makes us sick, because some pain doesn't need an explanation. Some trauma doesn't fit into words. Some longing makes no sense at all, and still hurts like hell. All of that is deeply human. Look at art, for example. Can you explain why a certain song makes you cry? Or why a painting leaves you mesmerized? Why dancing alone in your room relieves you more than talking to someone? Or why sometimes you hug someone and feel like crying without knowing why? That's life beyond logic. That's the realm of presence. It's when you let yourself be moved by experience, without needing to control it, without needing to understand it, without needing to protect yourself 24/7. And that's when something shifts. You realize you don't need so many defenses. That being vulnerable isn't being weak, it's being open. Open for genuine connections, ready to get off autopilot, ready to breathe again with your whole body, not just your mind. Remember Lucio? After that night, he cried for the first time in years. He started making small changes. He listened to music without doing anything else at the same time. He drank his coffee staring out the window, no phone, no news. He let pauses in conversations linger a bit longer. He said, "I don't know," when he truly didn't know. He started saying, "This makes me feel," instead of, "This makes me think." Little by little, he began to feel again. He remembered he once was a kid, that he used to love without fear, that he'd cried watching movies, once felt terrified of losing someone, once felt lonely even in a crowded party. He began to come home again, not to a physical house, but to an inner home, a place where he didn't need to justify his existence. This process isn't glamorous or straightforward. It doesn't follow a neat timeline. It's messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes painful, but it's real. And being real beats being right all the time. Because when you reconnect to your emotions, to your body, your feelings, everything takes on new color. The world stops being a project you have to optimize and goes back to being a place to be lived in. You start noticing details you used to overlook. The way sunlight streams through the window, the sound of someone you love laughing, the smell of a place that triggers old memories, the way your chest opens up when you hear certain words. You start living fully. It's not about abandoning reason, it's about blending it with your heart. There's a saying that sums it up nicely. Reason can take you far, but only the heart brings you back home. And because in the end, what holds life together isn't logic, it's affection, connection, presence. It's knowing that even when everything falls apart, you have someone who'll stick by you without having to get it. And maybe that's the most beautiful part. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to be present. Present for yourself, present for others, present for the life that keeps beating, even when it makes no sense. So the point isn't to reject reason, but to stop using it as a hiding place. Let logic be your tool, not your identity. An ally, not an armor. A bridge, not a wall. And above all, let yourself feel. Let yourself be contradictory, be incomplete, be human. Yes, a life beyond logic is more confusing, more unpredictable, more painful, but it's also richer, more intense, more alive. That's where you find what really matters. Because in the end, it's not what you know that changes you. It's what you experience. Maybe it's time to rely less on your head and more on your heart. Maybe what you keep looking for in explanations, you'll only find in surrender, in touch, in a shared silence, in a tear that falls without asking permission. Maybe deep down, you're tired of always being right, tired of holding it all together on your own, of being everyone's safe harbor, while you're secretly drowning inside. And if that's the case, it's okay. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to anyone, not to yourself. You don't have to understand everything all the time. or justify what you feel, or rationalize what hurts. You just need to let yourself feel. Because at the end of the day, it's not logic that comforts you at night, it's affection. It's not the argument that rebuilds you after you fall. It's the look of someone who stays. It's not reasoning that saves you from the edge. It's love, even if there are no words. Life is so much more than getting it right. It's about feeling it deep in your chest. And if this video spoke to you, if something here stirred up a memory, a void, a longing to come home to yourself, then share it. Send it to someone who, like you, might be using reason as a shield. Someone who seems too strong, but just needs a hug. Or maybe send it to yourself, to the you left behind. The you who felt, who dreamed, who cried without shame. And if you want to keep walking this path, subscribe to this channel. We're not here to be right. We're here to remember who we are. Between reason and feeling, maybe what truly saves us is just the courage to feel.